Well, all right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted on the Elite Sports and Entertainment Network. Uh, what a time to be alive, Dustin, man. Lots and lots of things have been going on. Trade deadlines, World Series, NBA. I mean, you name it. There's just so much going on, it seems like these days. If you so what do you think, man? Well, actually, first of all, let me do a proper introduction. Dustin, how you doing today, brother?
I got 2 inches of snow on the grass right now for Halloween. That should tell you.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
No,
Yeah.
no, not beautiful.
Oh, come on. It's just a little snow. No big deal.
Too early.
I only say that because I'm sitting over here in Houston and I go outside and it's like 46 degrees and I feel like, oh God, it sucks. Poor Dustin. But no, fellas. So yeah, man. So today, by the way, if you like our content, please like, share, and comment. But yeah, today we're going to talk about close to home. So let's just jump right into it and let's get this bad boy going. All right, Dusty, you know how we do, man. You have 5 minutes to say everything, or no, is it 10 minutes? I think it's 10 minutes. I don't care. Hey, just do what you want to do, Dustin. But first of all, let me get you where I need you to be. And here you go.
Well, today's close to home comes with a bit of a somber tone, despite the Minnesota Vikings winning their third game in a row against the Green Bay Packers on Sunday, 24-10 to move to 4-4. This also kind of put them in the stretch of a 6-game stretch where realistically the Vikings could have gotten to 8-5 or 9-4 and kind of really cemented themselves as a legitimate playoff contender before the season is over. That was until 3rd and 19 play with about 8 minutes and 12 seconds to go in the fourth quarter when Kirk Cousins was avoiding a sack, planted his right foot wrong in the grass, and the rest is history as he has officially torn his right Achilles tendon and will now be lost for the rest of the season. To make matters worse, Minnesota does not really have a backup plan for Kirk Cousins at this point. Trade deadline is at 4 o'clock Eastern time today, so there's always a chance that Minnesota tries to make a trade for somebody today. There's always a chance that they try to get a free agent to maybe come in and fill his void for the rest of the season. But no matter what they do today, that quarterback is not going to be ready to start until at a minimum week 10, which is next week. So this week, it's on the 5th-round rookie, Jaren Hall, out of BYU, that will be taking the snaps and making his NFL debut as a starter this week against the Atlanta Falcons. Hall took over for Cousins, obviously, in the fourth quarter on Sunday. He was 3 for 4 passing for 23 yards, and he also lost the fumble on his first snap that he took of the game, so it didn't start off that great. But limited sample size, he didn't look bad. He didn't look rattled, but you really can't say much when you only throw 4 passes, and most of them are only little 3-4 yard screen passes. So I'm very curious to see what Jaren Hall looks like this weekend. And if you listen to Kevin O'Connell's opening week press conference this week, it doesn't seem like Minnesota is even willing to try to trade for a quarterback, and it doesn't seem like Minnesota is willing to even go into the free agent market and look at any of them because they feel who they have on this roster right now is better than any option that they could possibly get, which I tend to disagree with. And you look at some of the options you could get, like a Ryan Tannehill, like a Kyler Murray, or some of these other guys. I think they're better options than what Minnesota has. But the other thing you got to look at, their backup quarterback is Nick Mullins. And Nick Mullins has been on the IR now for the last couple weeks with a bad back, which I didn't even know he was hurt until yesterday. But he comes off of the IR in week 10, which is next week. So the only thought process that I can see maybe Kevin O'Connell saying what he said was, we get through week 9 with Jaren Hall, and then we go to Nick Mullins in week 10 and ride it out the rest of the way because Nick Mullins has 23 career starts under Kyle Shanahan's system in San Francisco, and he's posted a 9-13 13 record, which isn't a great record, but at least he has starter experience and a very good offense, so he can move the ball. He's had some success in the past, and he knows how to win games. But if you look at the schedule, and if you look at the way that Minnesota's defense has been playing the last couple of weeks, and you can go really back against the Kansas City Chiefs when they lost that game to the Chiefs 27-20, but their defense really only gave up 17 points in that game because they had 2 turnovers inside their own 30 that Kansas City capitalized on. So basically the last month, Minnesota's defense has been playing very well. If they can just get game manager play from Jaron Hall, and if they can just get mediocre quarterback play from Nick Mullins, this is still a good enough team to win 4 of their next 5 games. Justin Jefferson is also slated to come back in Week 10, which is going to help Nick Mullins or Jaron Hall or whoever's starting at that point. Minnesota's season is not over. It might be kind of in a position now where you were looking at possibly being a buyer today when you ripped off the winning streak that you just had, but now you're kind of on the verge of, do we sell even a little bit right now or do we just stand pat? But the schedule that Minnesota has setting up for them does leave them in a position where they probably don't have to make any moves. And they still have the talent where they can win some of these upcoming games to continue to be in that playoff hunt all the way through December.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's going to be interesting to see what Minnesota does going forward for sure. All right, I'm going to get mine, and then we'll get to the next one. So, yeah, let's talk about the Astros for a minute. Not that they really matter right now because they're out of the postseason, but the one thing I'm looking at right now for the Astros is who is going to be their next manager. You know, Dusty Baker is no longer there. He has retired. He said he's not done. I don't think he's done. Honestly, Dustin, I don't think he's done. I think he kind of left the gateway open a little bit to see if another team is interested in him. But we'll have to wait and see what Dusty Baker. But as far as the Astros are concerned, there's a lot of guys they could look at. Now, Dana Brown and the Astros typically have gone outside of the organization when it comes to bringing in their manager, which I don't agree with. That I think Dana Brown needs to take a look at the Astros bench coach, Joe Espada, who used to play who was a Yankees coach for a while, and I think he also did one of the. Help me out, Dustin, real quick. Hey, I forget that in the World Baseball Classic, he also I forget what country he was manager for.
Joe Espada?
Yeah,
I thought it was Puerto Rico.
It might be Puerto Rico. Okay. Either way, so he's also the Puerto Rican manager down there. So he has plenty of experience. He obviously knows the culture of Houston. He knows the culture of what Dusty Baker was putting down over there. So, and the players liked Dusty Baker a lot. So if you got that kind of culture, why would you want to change it? I mean, in terms of if the culture that Dusty Baker put there is getting them there each and every year into the ALCS, why would you want to change that culture? And I think that's why I feel like Joe Espada, who already has that culture, knows that culture, and he's a very analytical guy, but he's also a player's coach kind of guy. I think he would fit really well there. But again, that's what I'm thinking. I also know that Brad Osmus I believe he's down there with the A's, the Angels. The Angels has also been linked to be interviewing for the Astros gig, and of course, you know he has ties to Houston when he was a catcher here. So Brett Osmus is there. Then you got Jeff Bannister, which is somebody I really like. He was with
Texas, wasn't he?
Huh?
He was Texas's manager for a couple of years.
Yeah, he was. I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Absolutely. So Bannister's there. Like you said, he has 2 AL West titles over there. Yeah, Jeff Bannister's a good one with the Rangers, like you said. And then also, which I really like the Jeff Bannister. I mean, if you can do that kind of stuff with the Rangers and you see what the D-backs are doing and how they progressed and how they're fighting against what most people thought was an anomaly, that they would even be in the World Series, I really like what Bannister's doing, and I would be a huge fan. If you're not going to go with the Spada, I wouldn't be mad if you went with Bannister, to be honest with you.
I heard another name today, too, that you might like.
Well, can I get through mine first?
Yeah, I was going to give it to you at the end.
Okay. So then you got Andy Green, former manager of the Padres, also the bench coach of the Cubs. He's been linked to possibly be interviewing. I'm not really excited about this one. And Dustin, and I know you might be able to expand on Green. I'm pretty sure you're a Cubs guy, so
I would not be excited on that. He failed at San Diego when he was given his first chance. I don't like him.
Yeah, I don't like him either. So that's kind of, at least we're on the same page with that one. And then the other one was Mark Kotze, the Oakland A's coach.
Oh.
Again, not excited about that one either if you look at what the Oakland A's are doing. And then there's two that I think that could possibly be a viable candidate, which is Walt Weiss, the Braves bench coach under Dana Brown, who is currently the Astros general manager. So Walt Weiss does have a connection with Dana Brown, so I can see that possibly happening. And the Braves have had a really good season, even though they didn't make the playoffs, even though they didn't make the NLCS. They still had the best record in the regular season, and you know what they've done. So I wouldn't be mad if they went after Walt Weiss. I think, like I said, he's a Dana Brown guy, so I wouldn't be mad if you see him there possibly. And then the last one would be Eric Young Senior, the Braves first base coach. Again, Dana Brown ties. So if I had to say who had the best chance of getting this, it would be Espada, Bannister, Walt Weiss, and Eric Young Sr. Those would be my top candidates that I would be looking at for this job. But Stat Guy, I know you said you had two other guys. So who were your two?
I heard Andy Pettit.
Really?
Getting an interview, and Mark DeRosa. And Mark DeRosa, if you remember, was the coach of Team USA for the WBC this year. And Andy Pettit was actually his pitching coach.
I wouldn't be mad at either one of those two guys, especially since, I wouldn't mind, especially from Pettit's side of it, because you know how dominating he was as a pitcher with the Yankees, and he also has ties to Houston because he's from Deer Park, which is right across the street from where I was born. So I know very familiar with where he's from. So I wouldn't be mad at with DeRosa. I'm not, if they want to interview him, let's see what. I don't really know as much about DeRosa, but I do know Andy Pettit. And one of the issues with the Astros this season was their pitching. And I think that's where Pettit would come in handy, is he does know pitching extremely well, and he would know when to pull a person, when to put a person in, and he would also have probably better decision-making. And I don't mean to throw Dusty Baker under the bus, but let's be honest. In Game 7, I wouldn't have gone with the trio that he went with after Javier went down when he wasn't pitching well. I felt he put a lot of young guys in there that weren't ready for the biggest part of the stage. I thought he should have gone with Verlander, at the very least, even Urquidy at that point, and he didn't do either one of those two. So I think Pettit will and the expertise that he has at pitching, that could play huge for the Astros, honestly. So yeah, those are good ones, and I hope. Hey, so we'll see what happens. Either way, I know Dana Brown is going to do his due diligence. And we'll have to wait and see where that leads to. On to other things real quick. Cowboys. Whew, Lord. Hey, we got the win, 43-20 over the Rams. And now we're at 5-2. But I will tell you this. The first part of that game, it was definitely domination by the Cowboys. But I felt like once that second half came around, I felt like the Cowboys defense kind of let up off the gas a little bit. And that kind of worried me, in terms of playing other competitive teams like the 49ers, the Eagles, which, by the way, we play the Eagles this Sunday. So you can't let up on that defense, especially with a guy like Jalen Hurts on the other side of the ball. So that kind of made me a little nervous. But one of the things I do want to point out, which I thought was interesting, is for the first time, Dak Prescott didn't have to lean on his defense to get the win. He got you 300-plus yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Yes, I don't like the 1 interception. But at the same time, the 4 touchdowns I do like. So I guess you got to take the good with the bad. And the fact that he gave his team an opportunity to win and not relying on the defense to get us the win speaks volumes there, at least a little bit for one game. Again, I'm not going to get totally on this bandwagon yet, but at least he contributed to that fact. Pollard had a not really too good of a day. He had like 53 yards on 12 carries, and then Lamb. I thought CeeDee Lamb was a pretty valuable guy in that one. He had 12 targets at 158 yards. If you watch CeeDee Lamb, he really bailed Dak out of some really tough spots in that game. So I want to give a shout out to him. But the one guy I really want to give most of the credit to, and I think has really stepped up a lot, is Bland, the cornerback. If you watch that, when Trey Diggs went down, I was a little nervous. I think a lot of people were a little nervous about what that would do to the Cowboys' defense. But if you look at what Bland has done in lieu of what Trey Diggs is not there for anymore, he got his 3rd pick 6 in the last 6 games. So he's got 3 pick sixes now on the season. And that's incredible, man. If just come in and step in for Diggs, you haven't played in a while, and to get 3 pick sixes on the season so far, Bland is doing great on defense. So we'll see where that takes us. But as of right now, like I said, the absence of Trey Diggs I thought was going to kind of be an issue, but it's not. Bland has actually stepped up. So I don't know. On the Philly, I ain't gonna lie to you, Dustin. I'm a little worried about the whole Philly thing, man.
I mean, it is Philadelphia. Dallas always plays Philly tough, but I don't know. I think Philly right now, with the trades they've made and just kind of the way they've played, they just haven't missed a beat.
Yeah, absolutely, and that really is the thing, that the fact that they haven't missed a beat is insane to me. I want to transition real quick now that we're coming out of close to home. I want to talk a little bit about this Game 3 of the World Series. I thought the D-backs did a good job. Unfortunately, they just kind of fell short at the end of it all. But, Dustin, I'm going to get your impressions of what you thought of Game 3 before I give mine. What did you think about Game 3 of the World Series? And then tell me how you like the matchups going into Game 4.
Well, Texas has the hope that Max Scherzer's healthy. He was scratched after, 2 or 3 innings last night with a tight back, and we know how back injuries go. They can flare up at any time, so they got to hope he's healthy so he can at least give them one more start this series if they need him. But right now, you have to look at Texas as possibly ending this series in 5 games. And the only reason why I say that is Texas has not lost a game on the road yet this year in the playoffs. They're undefeated on the road. So unless Arizona can figure out a way to win Game 4, Game 5, this series is going to be over in 2 days. I do think it goes 6 because I don't see Zach Gallen losing at home in that Game 5. That's the Diamondbacks' ace. He's been one of the Cy Young favorites for a while now. So I think he shows up, or Merrill Kelly. I forget who's going to get Game 5. One of those two. Either way, they both pitched well enough where they can win Game 5. But Texas just seems to me like the way they finished the season, losing the division when they lost the division, and just kind of how their season ended. It just seemed like they've been playing with a chip on their shoulder since the playoffs started. They just kind of are looking like that team that's been winning the AL West for basically the first 5 months right now, where their offense is just going to bludgeon you to death when they have an opportunity to. And then they have the pitching that's going to win games too when your offense struggles, versus the Diamondbacks. Yes, it's been a Cinderella run for them. Yes, no one's going to forget about it. But at the same time, I think you're starting to see Arizona starting to run out of gas a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think about, real quick before we? Well, actually, you know what? We'll come back to that. Hold on. We'll come back to that Game 4 prediction. Garcia goes down with a tore or a strain in his core muscle on a swing that he did. Apparently, he swung the bat. I guess he sprained something in his torso when he did so, and of course he was done. And they're saying typically with the strain of the torso, it usually takes about a week to recover from. Obviously, he doesn't have a week, so we'll see if that actually, how much of that's going to play into it. But they were actually able to still get the win, even though he went down. They were still able to hold on and get the win. Like you said, Scherzer goes down with back spasms, his back locked up on him in that 3rd inning. But I thought John Gray did a good job coming in and taking them the rest of the way. And unfortunately, because John Gray was used during this game, he won't be starting tomorrow because that was actually his scheduled start time. But because he was used, they're going to go with Haney starting tomorrow for John Gray. But I'll tell you, man, look, I watched this game, and I thought the biggest screw up to me, and I understand why he did it. He was just trying to get his team ahead. I thought, and I believe it was in the 3rd inning. They had like 1 out. No, actually, I think it was. They had 1 out, and Walker was on second. I forget who hit the double, but there was a double that was hit, and he tried to score home. But when he's getting ready to come up to 3rd base, the bench coach is giving him the stop sign, and his head isn't even looking at the bench coach. He already had it in his mind. I'm rounding 3rd. I'm going to home. I don't give a dang. And that's what he did. And, of course, he got thrown out at the plate. I thought he should have did at least a head-first slide rather than that weak, one-legged slide that he tried to do. But, again, I thought that was a big faux pas on his part. I thought at least he should have been looking at the third base coach to get some heads up. What did you think about that play on Walker when he got thrown out at home, which I thought was a huge momentum changer at that point?
Well, anytime you get thrown out at home, it's going to be a momentum changer.
Right.
And especially in the World Series, momentum is critical. Momentum is crucial, and you can't see the momentum, but you can definitely feel it. And you can obviously, as a team, you can feel the momentum shifting. And then obviously when you're watching it in person or when you're watching it on TV, you can kind of see those moments where had this play not happened to this team, maybe the momentum goes this way, but now that this play happened to this team, obviously the momentum's leaning towards that other team. In terms of Christian Walker, he's a first baseman for a reason. He's not the most fleet-footed individual out there. He's not the fastest guy in the world out there. So if you're going to slide, you have to at least make sure it's a legitimate slide. And they always tell you that sliding feet first is ultimately the fastest way to slide, because when you slide on your stomach, you actually slow yourself down a little bit because your belt and everything else is kind of catching the ground, so you're slowing yourself down. But, I mean, if I'm Christian Walker, I make more of an effort to try to run into the catcher and maybe jar the ball loose a little bit, as opposed to just trying to flat out slide. Obviously, you can't plow the catcher over anymore, but you can still make it a point where if you're going to slide into home, do a late slide and kind of get that catcher in a position where if you do a late slide and you're not all the way down, your elbows or your knees or something can jar that ball loose, and then you're safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, when you see that play, even when he went into a slide, he didn't go into a slide until after the catcher caught the ball. I thought he should have gone to that slide a little bit quicker, a little bit sooner than what he did. You know what I'm saying? It was even on an awkward slide. Like he was still halfway standing up while he's trying to slide. It was just ugly. The whole play was just ugly, to be honest with you.
It was like Christian Walker knew he wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
But he just went home because his coach told him to go home. Like, he had that sense, like, I'm not going to make this, so I don't know why you're sending me. So, well, here I am. Now I got –
No, but that's the thing, though. The third base coach was giving him the stop sign.
Oh, was he giving the stop sign?
Yeah, he gave him the stop sign. He overran the stop sign.
So then in Walker's mind, he's probably thinking, like, at that time, like, oh, I'm going to make it. But then I think he was at the point where it's like, well, I probably should have stayed at third now. So now.
Yeah, because he had already made up his mind that he was going to go home. He wasn't, because if you watch that play, he never even lifts his head up to look at the third base coach to see what he's being given. He has his head down the whole way as he's rounding third to go home. And he never even looks at the third base coach. Never even looks at him. I think he looked at him at the initial beginning when he was coming from second to third because he was giving him the go sign. But once he started running, his head went down, and he never even looked up again at the third base coach to see if he should stay or go. It was just already given that he was going to go. And I'm like, Walker, come on, brother. I know you're trying to get a run, and I get what you're trying to do, and I'm not going to hold that against you. But at the same time, you still need to be cognizant enough to look at the third base coach to see what he's telling you to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But
it is what it is, man. Hey, look, spilled milk is spilled milk, man. But, honestly, I felt like the D-backs, I didn't think they did a bad game. I just thought there was a couple of moments in that game where if they could have it back, they would love to have it back. Looking forward to game 4.
And what you just said, too, though, this is ultimately kind of why I've picked Texas to win the World Series since the playoffs really started and kind of been riding that Texas train since the beginning of the year. Bruce Bochy has the experience in the World Series. So every decision he makes, as opposed to every decision that Torey Tulavella is going to make, is going to be magnified, because if Torey makes the wrong decision, it's going to be looked at as he's a manager managing in the World Series for the first time, and maybe he didn't know the situation or whatever, versus Bruce Bochy. Every decision Bruce Bochy makes, it's like he's been there, done that before. Like, he knows when to make this move. He knows when to be aggressive. He knows when to do this. He knows when to do that. Yeah.
But, it seems, interestingly enough, the team that typically scores first is a team that typically wins the game.
Yep.
And especially in this specific series. And I felt like if Walker would have just stayed at third base it would have been a man on second, a man on third, and 0 outs. Zero. Yep. And had that happened, I felt like at the very least, I think the Diamondbacks would have had 3 outs to get that man home. And I think somebody would have, got that man home. And I think that was a critical point. I felt like if the Diamondbacks could have scored on Walker in that particular inning, that game, the momentum of that game could have shifted. And the fact that he didn't do that, he got thrown out, I felt like that was just one of the biggest momentum shifters, because anytime you give a team an opportunity to get you out at home, on the defensive side of that, when they come up for the offensive side, they are so jacked up and ready to go. It's unreal. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, no, I definitely know what you're saying, because you see it all the time, especially – I mean, the playoffs especially, like the team that scores first, like you said, it just seems that they play so much looser after they score first, because they know that they have the lead. The pressure's on that team that has not scored yet. And in this situation, Texas scores first. The pressure's on Arizona because Arizona knows they don't have the horses offensively that can keep up with Texas. So they're forced to keep that game as close as possible to give themselves a chance.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And here's the deal. I'll tell you this. Texas, as you know, Texas has kept their road streak alive. They've won all their games on the road. They haven't lost any games in the World Series on the road. So, again, that's just another, I guess, feather in their cap in this World Series, the fact that they have not lost at home. And the fact that they actually won a game at home, or excuse me, they've won every game on the road, and they've only won, but they actually have won one game at home, which, in the Astros series, they didn't win any games at home. That's a big shifter too, right? I mean, the fact they were able to win a game at home, that gives them confidence that, hey, we can win at home. Let's get back into this, right?
Yeah.
What a time to be alive, man. Honestly, what a time to be alive. Game 4 is coming up tonight, Dustin. Like I said, because John Gray, who was supposed to start at pitch last night, it actually put him out of it for today. So today we get Henney versus is it Mantiply? Is that how you say that guy's name?
Mantiply.
Yeah, Mantiply. So it's going to be Mantiply versus Henney tonight on the mound. Real quick, Dustin, how do you see tonight's game going versus last night's game?
I like Texas again tonight, mainly because I don't know what you're going to get out of Mantiply. At least you know that if Haney's even somewhat effective, you can get 5 innings out of him, maybe 6 depending on the pitch count, versus Mantiply had 28 strikeouts during the regular season, had a 4.62 ERA. The guy threw 39 innings during the regular season. So I don't really know what his pitch count is going to be. I don't know. Yeah, during the regular season, he threw 39 innings in 35 games, and that included 3 starts. And then in the postseason, he's pitched in 8 games, made 1 start, and he's thrown 6 innings. So unless Arizona's planning on going with a bullpen game, I don't really know what you're going to get out of Mantiply. I don't know how many innings he can give you. I don't know what his pitch count is going to be. And if he can only give you 2-3 innings, it's not looking good for Arizona the rest of the series, because they can't keep riding that bullpen as much as they have. And if you're forced to go to that bullpen for 5 or 6 innings today, you better hope to God that Zach Gallen can give you 7-8 innings in Game 5. Otherwise, you're not getting through Game 5.
I see it a little bit differently just for tonight's game, not the whole series, but just for tonight's game. I see the Diamondbacks evening up the series. And the reason why I say that is I'm not a big believer in Haney. What I saw of him pitch, he has not pitched well in the playoffs, to be honest with you. Matter of fact, the Astros actually destroyed him when they were at home. So I'm not a big fan of his. He's given up, I think, 5 or 6 runs quite often. So he had a 4.12 ERA going into the playoffs, and I think his ERA has spiked up a little bit since he's been in the playoffs. So I'm not a big fan of Haney's. So for that reason, I just feel like in the Diamondbacks, they don't strike out a whole lot. So I think they're going to force Haney to throw strikes. And can he get himself out of those jams? He didn't do it very well against the Astros. I'm curious to see how well he does it against these Diamondbacks, who actually have a really good lineup, and they can play at home, and they play at home well. So for that reason, I'm going to give it to the Diamondbacks tonight. I think they even up the series. But I do agree with you ultimately about the bullpen usage, because he's only going with the 3-man rotation right now in the starting lineup, which does put a lot of pressure on that bullpen. Because it puts a lot of pressure on that bullpen, I just don't know either. So I think ultimately it probably goes back to Texas 3-2. But I do see it going back to Texas number 1, and I do see them getting the win tonight. We will find out, more to come, more to follow, but still, ultimately, it's been a good ALCS, it's been a good NLCS, and it's been a great World Series up to now. So I'll tell you this, Dustin, no matter what people say, in this MLB season, we have gotten some really good baseball. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's been, in my opinion, one of the better postseasons that we've had in terms of MLB, just because you have teams like Texas, who's never won a World Series before. They haven't been in the World Series since 2011. You have a team like Arizona. They've only been to the World Series one time, which they beat the Yankees in 7 games. It's nice to see new faces that typically are not at this point. Like we said a couple weeks ago, first time in 7 years that the Astros or the Dodgers are not in the World Series. So it's almost been a decade since two new teams are in the World Series. It's been over 15 years that a division winner has not made the World Series, and it's been over 23 years that 2 wild card teams are in the World Series.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's just a testament to how well rounded some of these teams have become to go for the wild card on both sides of the ball to there. But you know what? Honestly, I got to be honest with you, Dustin, and this is just how I feel about it. I think the Diamondbacks are the true wild card story. I don't know if Texas is the true wild card story, only because of you know how well they played all season long, right? I mean, the Astros got them at the end of the season, but it's almost kind of like, you know, if I had to go back and look at it, I would say I would give an even tie between Houston and Texas, only because the fact that Houston beat Texas more times during the regular season, but because they got them in the postseason, played that well in the postseason, it's almost like I look at these guys as being dead even for that division. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What a time to be alive, man. All right, hey, let's get into Thursday night preview. We got the Titans versus the Steelers. Dustin, give me your thoughts.
Well, this game suddenly got a lot more interesting, I think. You look at the hit that Kenny Pickett took last Sunday. His status is up in the air for Thursday. I know Mike Tomlin said he's leaving the door open for Pickett to start if he's healthy enough, but today Mitchell Trubisky took the first team reps today, and I expect him to take the first team reps tomorrow. So I think given that it's a short week, I don't see any reason why you would need to start Kenny Pickett at this point. Given that it's a short week, just go with Trubisky 1 week, give Pickett the extra. Basically, he'll have 2 weeks off pretty much before he plays again, so just give him the extra rest. And yes, Trubisky may not be the best quarterback out there, but he's had some success in the right situation, so I'm not going to say he can't win the game because he has a good defense. He's got TJ Watt. He's got playmakers that can make plays happen. He's just got to play smart. When it comes to Tennessee, what we saw from Will Levis on Sunday, basically coming in for Malik Willis, who has struggled since been given any opportunity. He was a second or third round pick in last year's draft. Filled in for Ryan Tannehill down the stretch last year. He filled in for Ryan Tannehill a little bit this year. And every single time that Tennessee's called on him, he's looked completely overmatched in the NFL. He's looked lost. He's looked like it's a very questionable pick at this time. But Will Levis steps in there, throws for 4 touchdowns against a pretty good Falcons defense, looks better than every other rookie quarterback that came out in this year's class apart from C.J. Stroud. And with Ryan Tannehill's contract expiring at the end of the year and with the trade deadline being today and the possibility that Ryan Tannehill might get traded, I don't think Tennessee right now can afford to go away from Will Levis. I think Will Levis is going to be their answer the rest of this season. I think Will Levis will be their starter going forward next season. And I think Tennessee gets Pittsburgh tonight or on Thursday. I think Tennessee wins a close one, but I think Will Levis is going to outplay Mitchell Trubisky to win that game.
So you definitely think Will Levis will be playing tonight for Tennessee, not tonight. Excuse me, Thursday night for.
Yeah, after what he did against Atlanta's defense, you can't afford to sit him. You can't afford to take a guy that just threw 4 touchdowns in his first NFL game and sit him for a guy that has 6 touchdowns in 8 career games. Well,
there you have it, man. And that's the thing, man. Will Levis, man, jeez, man. Oh, by the way, but before I go to the Titans, let me start with the Steelers side of it because, one thing I thought was interesting with Trubisky was, with Pickett got George Pickens involved. He got him targets. He did a lot of things with Pickens that made it very successful for him. I've noticed that Trubisky hadn't really even thrown the ball. I think he had maybe one or two targets before halftime before he even did anything with them after the half. Do you see that as kind of an issue? I mean, I don't understand why you don't get your number one guy or why you're not throwing the rock to him more often than just one or two targets before halftime.
I don't think it's an issue. I think it's more so just the chemistry side of things because you got to remember Pickett and Pickens are both rookies last year. So they were kind of working hand in hand together last year through camp and doing everything together versus Trubisky's more of a veteran and he gravitated more towards Chase Claypool last year when he got to Pittsburgh. He gravitated more towards Deontay Johnson when he got to Pittsburgh last year because those were the guys that he felt comfortable with. And he opened the season last year as the team's number one starter. Yeah. And it wasn't until Kenny Pickett took over that George Pickens turned into the George Pickens that we've seen. So it's not that it's a concern. It's just that from a chemistry side of things, Trubisky's had that chemistry better with Deontay Johnson and the others as opposed to Pickett's had the better connection with Pickens.
So do you think that Trubisky gets Pickens more involved against the Titans, or do you see more of the same as what he did the last game?
Oh, he'll be more involved against the Titans, that's for sure. I think he's going to spread the ball out a lot more if he does start. But it's not. I don't think Pickens is going to have the games that he has with Pickett as he does.
Right.
I think it's going to be more so balanced where Johnson gives you about 60, 65 yards. Pickens will give you about 70 yards. I think it'll be more balanced as opposed to what you see when Pickett is the quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we all know what Pickens brings and how well he plays, and I hope they do, man. Honestly, because he's on my fantasy team. No, I'm kidding. But no. Will Levis, I want to go to the Titans a little bit, man. Will Levis, geez, played amazing versus the Falcons. Like you said, 238, 4 touchdowns, 3 to Hopkins alone. I mean, that's incredible. 3 to Hopkins by himself. That is just incredible. The other one was to the other guy, Ekeline. Is that how you say his last name? Ekeline?
Westbrook Akiner.
Akiner. Okay, I knew I was gonna say it wrong. Akiner. Yeah. So I think. Like you said, I don't know how you would put Tannehill back in there, especially the way that Levis played. I don't think you do, especially like you said, Dustin. They got a quick turnaround. Why try to throw him back in there too soon if he's just coming off an injury? I say you give him one more week if you are going to put him back in there at all. But here's the deal. I also believe if Levis goes off against the Steelers and has another great game like he had the last one, that I don't think you see Tannehill anymore. I think it's officially Will Levis's team at that point. So if he had 2 back-to-back stellar games, why would they pull him? It makes no sense to me.
I think it's Levis's team regardless. There's a reason.
I mean, I agree with that. I'm just saying, I think if he has another game, I think he needs one more game like he had to really solidify him as that guy. Does that make sense? I mean, because you can make the case for one game, but I want to see 2 games, and I think the coaches probably want to see 2 games before they really say, okay, But again, they could absolutely trade Tannehill to the Vikings, like you said, before the trade deadline before today. So there's no guarantee that Tannehill will even be with this team if they decide to trade him. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are up in the air for sure. Henry, should round up, I think, more yards than Harris did. I think Najee Harris is just – I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on with Pittsburgh over there, but Najee Harris just seems to be on the back burner now, even though he was the guy that they took, in 2000 – was it 22, I think it was?
21.
In the first round?
21.
What do you make of Najee Harris, man? Why is this guy just not able to perform?
Because he turned into Eddie Lacy and he got fat and overweight. He's slow. He can't hit the hole. He has no explosion at all. He had fumbling issues pretty much all season long last year, so he was already – in the doghouse as it was last year, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers go and get a rookie running back this year. I can't even remember his name off the top of my head, but they get
Warren.
Yeah, and he's been getting more snaps than Harris because he's more explosive and he protects the football. Yes, Harris is good for your short yardage situations, which every team needs that short yardage back, but you can't, unless you're Derrick Henry and you're 6'2", 6'3", you can't be a 5'10", 250-pound running back and expect to do anything in the NFL because you're too big and you're too slow.
That's true. Because and I agree with you there, and I think you're right. I think he's not able to have the explosion that you need going through the holes like he once had when he first was in college at that point. So then you look at the Titans' defense. I think the Titans' defense is outperforming what the Steelers are able to do as well on defense, 362 to 401. So I think the Titans, will have the better offense going into Thursday night's game. And I also think they're going to be the better defensive team going into Thursday night's game. So that doesn't bode well too much, I don't personally think, for Pittsburgh. Matter of fact, I think Titans get the win. And I think it's a close game, but I think it's going to be probably like 35-21, something around that neighborhood. And I think DeAndre Hopkins goes off for another big game. I thought Jacksonville did a good job beating the Steelers last week when they got him 20-10. Trubisky went 138, a touch, and 2 interceptions, and like you said, in place of Pickett. And I think Pickens, like you said, just got limited targets. So I think if Pittsburgh wants a chance to win, they got to get the rock more to Pickens, and they got to get Najee Harris going or get this guy Warren going and get more rushing yards, what they got against Jacksonville Jaguars. And that's why I got the Titans winning this game. But how do you see it?
I think the Titans win it. I think it's be like a 20-17 game just because the Steelers defense will give Levis problems, especially TJ Watt. They will give Levis a lot more problems than what Atlanta did. But at the same thing, Mitch Trubisky's not going to beat you. You pretty much have to beat yourselves to let Mitch Trubisky beat you. And if worse comes to worse, the best way to take pressure off of a young quarterback is to pound the running game. And Derrick Henry can pound the running game, especially this time of year when the weather starts getting cold and teams don't like to be tackling a heavy machine. Yeah, give the ball to Derrick Henry because the defense is going to be regretting tackling him real quick.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree with you. All right, we're going to transfer to the last topic of tonight, or today. I'm saying tonight. The last topic of today before we get out of here, Cousins and his replacement. Who will it be? Dustin, man, I know you kind of hit on this a little bit and you're close to home, but if Cousins is going to get a replacement, who do you think it's going to be? And by the way, before you say anything, the trade deadline is today at 4 p.m. Eastern. So we got, 12? It's almost 12 o'clock now. So we got about 3 more hours before the trade deadline-ish. 3 more hours-ish before the trade deadline. So what do you think?
Realistically, I think they're going to roll with Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins. It just seems like that's kind of the decision they've made. Otherwise, if they planned to give somebody else a look, they would have signed him already. And I think that they're going to go with Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins. If I had a choice of who I would want via a trade, and it would have to be a trade that's reasonable. Yes, Ryan Tannehill makes sense because he's in the final year of his contract, but I think Minnesota would have to give up a little too much for him. Plus, they'd have to be willing to take on some of that $26 million salary, which I don't think they want to do. But if I'm looking at other backups that I think would work well in Minnesota, Jameis Winston comes to mind, mainly because you have Taysom Hill in New Orleans who can back up Derek Carr. You have Derek Carr locked up for 3 years after this year, so Jameis Winston's not going to see much time if he stays in New Orleans, and he's a guy that's on a 1-year, $5 million deal, which is a very reasonable price tag. Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's another guy that a veteran presence that took Cincinnati to the playoffs 5 straight years, filled in for the Saints last year. He's with Carolina backing up Bryce Young right now. That's another guy that's on a cheap 1-year deal that you could bring in and just pencil him in the rest of this season. And if he gets you to the playoffs or at least keeps you competitive, then you can go into next season and be like, Dalton will re-sign you on a 1-year deal, but you're going to be here with Cousins and you're basically going to be his placeholder until he comes back. But realistically, I want Minnesota to hit the free agent market. There's 2 names that I would really like them to look at. First name is Matt Ryan. I understand that Matt Ryan is technically retired, but I don't know if he's actually fully retired or not, but he's a 37-year-old quarterback, so it's not like he's getting any younger. But being a 37-year-old quarterback, it would cost Minnesota $1.4 million to sign him the rest of the year. I think for $1.4 million, I definitely think he's worth the risk, especially if their offensive line continues to play the way they played the last couple weeks where they're not giving up a lot of sacks. I think that does help Matt Ryan out a lot because he's a pocket passer that doesn't like to run. And the other one that I would take a look at is Carson Wentz. Obviously, the last couple of years for Carson Wentz have not gone well at all. But even when you look at when he was with the Indianapolis Colts, everyone wants to crap on Carson Wentz for the year that he had with the Colts that year because the Colts, I think, went 8-8 and they missed the playoffs because they lost the final 3 games of the year. Carson Wentz had 27 touchdowns and 4 interceptions that year in Indianapolis.
Right.
He did not turn the ball over. I mean, he turned the ball over a crap ton with Washington last year, but I think that was just a bad situation for him. I don't think he ever should have went to Washington in the first place. But when Carson Wentz is healthy, he's not the MVP candidate he once was, but he's a guy that can take care of the football and protect the football. And with Justin Jefferson coming back in 2 weeks, he's also a guy that has a big enough arm where you can stretch the field. And at 32 years old, theoretically, you could give him a 2-year contract, which basically can give you that safety valve if Kirk Cousins is either A, not ready to come back next year, should you bring him back, or B, you elect to move on from Cousins altogether this year, and then you go into the draft and draft a guy like Michael Penix or somebody quarterback until the rookie's ready.
Yeah, I agree with it pretty much on about everything you said there. I agree. I mean, Mac, I think some of the notable guys that you could trade for if you're going to trade, which I think like you said, the fact that we're getting so close to 4:00, unless they've been working on stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about.
I heard this morning that Minnesota was in talks with Jameis Winston last night, so I don't know how far.
Yeah, I'm about to say that was another one, right? Jameis Winston. I've heard his name thrown out. I think if I'm Minnesota, I'm looking at all my options, right? I'm looking at Jameis Winston. I'm looking at Mac Jones. I'm looking at Zappy. Whoever New England wants to get rid of, either one of those two. I'm looking, like you said, Matt Ryan. I think Matt Ryan makes the most sense to me because I think you can get him super cheap, get him on a 1-year deal, come back. If you're sold on Cousins and you have him coming back, I think Matt Ryan gives you the most flexibility, cap-wise, money-wise, experience-wise. But then, like you said, there's also Ryan Tannehill, and then there's also Carson Wentz. All of those guys you could bring in to do the one simple thing, and that's if you're going to ride with Kirk Cousins next year, then you basically bring in a gap field quarterback. All these guys are gap field guys. You bring in a gap field guy, you let him gap it up a little bit, and then you either roll with Kirk Cousins next year, or you say, you know what, hell with it, I'm going to tank. And if you're going to tank, then you throw Jaron Hall into the mix and let Jaron Hall get all the experience he can. Yeah, he won't probably win you any games. Or if he does, it'll be maybe a 1 or 2 on the crappier teams. But let Jalen Hall get all the experience he can get before you go into next year. And that's the way I think I'm rolling with it. Honestly, stat guy, if I'm rolling with this, I'm gonna give Jaron Hall full reins of the team. I'm gonna let him, and then you got Nick Mullins coming in. He can help out too as well when he comes back week 10. But give this rookie guy all the reins you can give him to get all the experience you can give him. And if you tank and you suck, then like you said, you got Michael Penix just waiting in the wings to be drafted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I think is going to end up happening. I don't think Minnesota's going to tank just because they owe it to guys like Harrison Smith and Danielle Hunter and some of these guys that have been with Minnesota the past decade through the tough times and through the good times. Like, they owe it to those guys to at least go out and try. Like, granted, if you start Jaron Hall, you're kind of telling fans that we're going to tank, but without telling them we're going to tank because you're not going to trade away Danielle Hunter and you're not going to trade away other pieces. You're just going to kind of roll out there with what you have to see what he can do. My only thing with this is, and that's why I kind of brought up the Carson Wentz and Andy Dalton situation, is even if they go and draft a guy like Penix, even if they do decide that Cousins is worth another extension, whether it's a 2 or a 3-year extension, the biggest problem Minnesota has had since Kirk Cousins has been here is they have not had a reliable backup to step in if he got hurt. And this is something that Minnesota has not had to worry about since he's been in Minnesota because he's been one of the most durable quarterbacks in the NFL for the past 10 years. They have not had a situation where they've had games where he's gotten pulled because he's struggling. They've had games where he sprained his ankle and he came out for the rest of the game and you had to roll with a backup for 2 quarters, but they haven't had a situation where you've legitimately needed a quarterback for weeks. And that's kind of why I want like a Andy Dalton brought in or a Jameis Winston or a Carson Wentz, because like I said, at worst, you roll with them for 10 games this year and you see what you can do. And then if you decide to bring Cousins back next year, then you have your reliable backup in Jameis Winston or Carson Wentz in case something happens to Cousin where he goes down. Same situation where if you draft Michael Penix, you sit Penix for a year behind Carson Wentz, and if Wentz ends up getting hurt, Penix is waiting for you to take over. And then when Penix is ready to fully take over, if one of those guys wants to stay and just be the backup, that gives you a reliable backup. That's been the biggest problem Minnesota's had in the last 7 years is they haven't had a reliable backup that you can count on in situations like this. And that's why it's smart for Minnesota to either make a trade to get a starter this year that can go into that backup role next year, or basically roll, like you said, roll with Jaren Hall to see what he can do this year. And then if you like what you see, then just bring Cousins back for 2 more years and just keep Hall as your backup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to be honest with you, and I hate to say it, but I think Cousins going down could have been maybe the spark plug that Minnesota needs to figure out what it is they really want to do at that specific position, right? So I think Cousins going down gives management the excuse they need to explain it to the fans why they went with Jaren Hall versus any other excuse they could have given, right? Because if you don't look at what Jaren Hall has, how are you really ever going to know what you have? You could be like the Green Bay Packers over there and riding Jordan Love, sitting in the wings forever, only to finally bring him up and realize you don't have jack squat in this guy, and then you're back to the drawing board again. At least with this, now management has a reason that they can reasonably explain to the fans, hey, look, Cousins is down. We're going to give Jaren Hall the reins and see what he can do for us and see if this is our actual quarterback of the future. And if not, then maybe he's good enough to be the backup, or maybe we just got to cut him. Either way, a lot of answers can be had in this season that can set Minnesota up for success in future seasons, i.e. either they bring in another quarterback to replace Cousins, or they go and they just, if they're bad enough, and they go get a Michael Penix Jr., and then let's roll with Michael Penix Jr. Either way, I think it gives management a reason enough excuse to start Jaren Hall to find out what you actually have in him, and they can explain it to the fans as to why they did it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, but like the only thing that I am skeptical about is, do they honestly believe that they're going to stick with Jaren Hall the rest of the way? Or is it literally just this 1 week they're going to start him, and then when Nick Mullins comes off of IR next week, do they go to Nick Mullins? Because if that's the case, then I'm going to be upset that they didn't make a trade. Because what is the point of starting Jaren Hall for 1 game if you're just going to go to Nick Mullins when he's healthy? If that was honestly what your thought process was, then you should have went out and got a trade, because then you could have still started Jaren Hall.
I agree.
And then hand it over to the guy you just traded for.
Yeah. No, again, that's a very valid point, and I would totally agree with you as well. Again, if they bring him back 1 game and then bring him back Mullins the next game, I would be thinking the same thing. Well, what was the point of that? Because Mullins can't get you to the playoffs, so why would you do that? I mean, why wouldn't you just ride Hall out and see what he can do? I mean, so I totally get your point. I totally get the reason why you would say that, because I would totally be on board, and I am on board with what you're saying. Absolutely. All right, let's get us some final thoughts. Dustin, final thoughts, baby.
Yeah, it's going to be a boring night tonight, Jay, because last year was a sports equinox where all 5 of the major sports were in action yesterday. You had 11 NBA games yesterday. You had 8 hockey games yesterday. You had Monday Night Football. You had the World Series, and then you had 2 MLS playoff games yesterday. So all 5 of the professional sporting events were going on last night, which is something that I think has only happened 1 or 2 other times ever. So
that's a good reason.
Was something worth watching yesterday. Now you look at tonight, World Series is on. There is 2 hockey games on, and there's like 2 basketball games on. So there's barely anything to watch compared to last night. So it's going to have a little bit of a boring taste. But then we get back to this weekend where I know we'll talk about it later this week. There is a lot of big college football games coming up this week and that are drastically going to impact the way that playoff picture looks like next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk next week, I definitely want to talk about why Texas is still sitting at 7 and Oregon slides up ahead of them. I'm still not happy about that. But anyway, it is what it is. We'll talk more about that as Thursday comes along. Again, Dustin, it seems like this World Series has, if you look at the reports in terms of like people watching it, if you look at the TV ratings of this World Series, it hasn't been all that great. Matter of fact, it's been pretty rough on the TV ratings. Like I said, people just aren't tuning in to this World Series. And last night, I kind of could get it because, like you said, all 5 sports were playing last night. So it's not like the World Series, just had that much garnership, right? And let me ask you this. Furthermore, because of that, Dustin, do you see that how much baseball has slid down by the wayside when the biggest event that's going on in that sport is going on, but yet people are still tuning in to other sports and not necessarily gravitating to that one specific sport?
I don't necessarily know if they've I don't know if they've gone down in terms of like popularity or things like that. I think it's more so you look at the World Series of the past, and like you always had Houston in there, you always had the Dodgers in there, and some of these other teams. So you always had one of the major markets were always hosting the World Series. And ultimately, when it comes to viewership and things like that, it is the market size that does make a difference. The bigger the market that's playing in the World Series, the bigger viewership you're going to generate by that market. I'm not going to say like the Arlington, Dallas area is not a big market, but Phoenix is a very small market. Yes, the city of Phoenix itself is a good-sized city, but the overall market itself is a small market, which is why Arizona is always viewed as a small market team. So when you have a small market team playing in the World Series, just like when Tampa Bay made the World Series, those World Series were very low in terms of viewership because you had the Dodgers market, which is all the way out to New York City because of the Brooklyn Dodger days, plus out in LA, plus all these other like LA suburbs, which are huge. And then literally you had the Tampa Bay market, which was Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, Siesta Key, and like those little tiny areas around there. I think it's more so, yes, there's a lot of things that were going on last night, basketball, hockey, football, etc. But having a small market team in the World Series is always going to hurt your overall viewership of a game just because you don't have the viewership watching it because it's not as popular as it would be if it was like Los Angeles against New York or New York against Chicago.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that as well. Okay, listen, if you guys have enjoyed this episode, please tune in on Thursday where me, Stat Guy, and Logan will break down our top 5 college games heading into Saturday, as well as I'm sure we'll talk at least a little bit of World Series coverage as to what's happened since tonight. So you can catch more of that with me and Dustin and Logan on Thursday. And thank you for watching, and we will catch you on Thursday. Y'all be good. We out of here.